This video is a beginner's tutorial on Fusion 360. We're going to be making two different egg cups using some of the basic functions. And this is a nice video to start off with because it shows you that there's two different ways to try and get to the same end goal. And there's also a bit of repetition in these videos, and that just allows you to cement some of the key concepts on Fusion. So let's jump in and see how it goes. So we're going to start this egg cup by creating a sketch. So to do this, click on the Create drop-down menu and select Create Sketch, which should be near the top. Then it's going to give us the option of selecting which plane that we'd like to draw on. So I'm just going to select either of these two vertical planes, so either the XY or the YZ planes. And you'll notice that Fusion automatically puts us at a 90-degree angle from that plane. So it just makes us straight on with it, and it just makes it a bit easier to sort of see those dimensions that we're creating. So I'm just going to move my floating head out the way. You'll notice that it also opens up a sketch palette. So what this does is it gives you an idea of your visibility and when to turn things on and off. So you can get rid of that sketch grid if you just want to draw a bit more freehand. You can get rid of things like snap. You can hide dimensions and constraints. Another thing that I'd be careful of that a lot of people make the mistake of is unless you really need it, make sure 3D sketch is unticked. Otherwise, that will make a lot of issues. So from here, I'm going to start adding some of those sketch elements. So again, I'm going to go to the Create panel and I'm going to select Line. So now my cursor is going to change to this small grey cross. So it's asking me to place a first point. Now, at the minute, it stays as that grey cross. But if I lock it into, let's say, the origin point, you'll notice that the cursor changes to this blue square. So for now, we're going to use that origin. So I'm just going to left click when it changes to that. I can then drag this around. And what you'll notice is before I then click again to specify my endpoint, it gives me two small dialog boxes just to set some of the dimensions for this. So the first one is how long that line is. So let's just say I go with 80 millimeters. I can just type that into the keyboard and you'll notice that it comes up with this padlock. That just means that that dimension has been locked in. So I can still move this line, but it can't change how large it is because it's locked into that. If I then decide I don't want that, I can press escape and then it'll just go back to allowing me to do it freely again. Also, if it comes up with a second dimension box like this one has, I can simply press tab just to swap back and forth between the two. So for now, I'm just going to add this line and I'm just going to get it to follow this green axis to the top. Doesn't matter if your axis is a different color. And I'm just going to go with 100 millimeters for this line and press enter. So you'll notice that it's added this dimension. So you can click and drag this just to move it away, just to help you with your visibility. If I suddenly decided that I wanted to either change or delete this dimension, I can left click on it once and then double click on it to then go back into that dimension window. So just as before, type in the value that you require and press enter. If I want to delete that dimension, I just have to left click, press delete on the keyboard. So now that we've added that first line, we're going to add two more lines. So I'm just going to go to the create and then select line once again. This time, I'm also going to add this line to the origin. So left click. But this time, I'm going to show you a little bit about how to add some constraints as well. So you'll notice that it starts trying to lock onto this axis if I start to move it near there. So I'm just going to bring it up a bit diagonal and I'm just going to place it somewhere along this point here. So I'm going to go with about 40 millimeters and press enter. So this is now locked in with this dimension, but you'll notice that it's blue. This just means that it's not quite fully constrained. It's just partially constrained with that dimension. So what I want to do is I want to make this at a 90-degree angle to this one. Now, there's two different ways I could do this. I could left click on this one, and then from the constraints panel, I can then select the constraint that's going to lock that into the condition that I want. So the first way of doing this is by selecting horizontal or vertical. So all it does is if you've got a line that's not quite locked into those, it just locks it into whichever one's closest. So if I click that, it's just going to make this line horizontal. And then I'm going to press escape just to then go off this constraint function. So you'll notice that it's added this symbol here. And if I move my floating head again, you'll just see that it locks it into that horizontal constraint. So once again, the same as the dimension, I can just left click that and press delete if I want to get rid of that. Another function that's quite good on Fusion is if I left click on this first line and then keep hold of Control on the keyboard, I can then select multiple elements. So if I select this second line, you'll notice that some of these constraints from the panel go blank. That's just Fusion telling me that there's only so many constraints I can add with those two lines. So the other way I could add that constraint is by selecting perpendicular, just to lock those in into having that right angle. And then I'm going to press escape once again, but this time the constraint is added just in that corner where they meet. So we're going to add a third and final linear line to this sketch. So we're going to go to create, line. This time though, we're going to add a horizontal line starting from the end of this first line. So once again, it's going to go into a square just to show me that it's locking in. So I'm going to click that, drag it out a bit, and it needs to go just a bit further than that other line. So I'm going to select 55 millimeters and press enter. So we've now got these three lines all together joined at separate points. But what we need to do is add a curved line to this section just to try and give us that curved edge of that egg cup. So in order to make this a bit easier, I'm going to untick dimensions just so I've got a bit more ease in this area here. So what we're going to do now is add a line that connects these 2 points, but we don't want this to just be a straight line. So what we're going to do is go to create, and we're going to select spline, and we require a 5th point spline for what we're doing. So what this is asking me to do now is specify a first point. So with a 5th point spline, you're adding many different points together, and what it'll do is it'll automatically calculate a nice curved line that cuts through all of those. So I'm going to start by locking it in to the end of this line. Then I can simply drop separate points along that path by left clicking, and then eventually joining it back to this top line. Then all I need to do is click that green tick and it'll add that line. So what you'll notice is the inside of this shape has turned blue. That's just to show me that it's a closed 2D sketch, so there's no gaps between those lines now. Also, if you're not quite happy with that spline, if you then left click on it, you'll notice that you have all these little circles coming off it. If you click and drag those outer ones, you can then bend and fold those lines. If you click on these inside ones, the white ones, you can move those lines and get them where you want them to be. So I'm just going to drag these in just a bit and then bend that line back around. So feel free to have a play with that one and pause the video and just get that how you like it. But for now, we're just going to continue by clicking Finish Sketch. So you'll now see we've got this closed 2D sketch. So what we've just done is created almost like a cross section of our egg cup, but only half of it. And the reason why we're doing this is because we're going to revolve that shape around in order to make our 3D shape. So we're going to go to the create panel and we're going to select revolve. So this dialog box will then automatically open, and this just allows us to complete the steps in order to do that function, as well as setting some of the parameters of how we want that function to work. So the first thing it's asking us to do is to select a profile. Now what we need to do is just click this and make sure that we select this profile. If we then decide that this is the profile that we don't want, we can simply click that X and then select the ones that we do require. But for this, we just need that profile. Then it's asking us to select an axis. So this is just asking where we want to rotate that profile around. So for this, we're just going to select this vertical axis here. So you'll notice that it now adds some more criteria for that revolve based on what we've selected. So we can change the angle. We can also control how far we want that revolve to be. So it might be that we only want it to revolve halfway around. But for this, what we want to do is we want to do full, so that it adds that full 360. Also, we've got operation, which allows us to either join that shape onto another one, use that revolve to cut through another shape or intersect it, or create it as a new body or component. So for now, we're just going to leave that as new body and click OK. So if I now click the home button just above this view cube, we can now see we've made this egg cup shape. Now, obviously, using that spline, it's not perfect unless you have a play around with it, but it's quite good just for making those curved transitional shapes. Thing that we're going to do is one of the foundations to a lot of CAD designs, and that's going to be to add a 2D sketch. So to do this, go to the create panel in the top left, and we're going to select create sketch. If you're quite new to Fusion, which I imagine some of you are, if you hover over any of the functions on Fusion, it will give you a brief description of what that function does, along with how to add and what you can do on that function. So we're going to go ahead and select create sketch, and this is going to show our origin. So it's just going to give us these different axes and also these planes to draw on. So for this one, I'm just going to select this bottom one, the XZ plane. So all you do is left click when it goes gray to select that plane. So once you do this, you'll notice if I just float my head to one side, is that you get this view cube up in the top right. So if I press the home button, it's going to take me to this isometric view, and that just gives you an idea of where you are in terms of this workspace. You can also use this view cube to look at different orthographic views and other isometric views. But for now, we're just going to stick with this top view. So we should be looking at this sketch grid from straight on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to now try and follow that workflow that Fusion's designed to try and give us. So it wants us to try and work from left to right along this panel along the top. So we're going to start in the create panel. So we're going to go to create and we're going to select circle. And the one that we like is this center diameter circle. That's the one we're going to be using for this. So also you might notice for some of the features, they do have a letter next to them. That just shows you that it's got a keyboard shortcut for that function. So I'm just going to select center diameter circle. So my cursor is now going to change to this small gray cross. That's just showing me where I'm going to place that center point. And I want this at the origin of our workspace. So you'll notice that if I hover the cursor, it's going to change to this square cursor instead. And all that's doing is showing me that it's locked in to that origin, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to left click to place that first point and let go of the mouse. Then if I drag the mouse out, it's going to let me define the end of this circle. So it's going to let me drop this outer edge. You'll notice that it's to 3 decimal places. So usually if that doesn't matter too much, you can drop it on your grid. Or if you know your exact value, you can just type that into the keyboard and it will just insert it into this little small dialog box here. So for this circle, we're going to need it to be 38 millimeters. So I'm just going to type in 38 and that circle will automatically change to that. And you'll notice that it comes up with this padlock symbol. That's just Fusion showing me that it's locked into that exact dimension. So if I move the mouse around, you'll notice that even though the position is changing, that dimension is now locked in. So that dimension is now constrained. If I suddenly decide that that's not what I want, I can simply press escape on the keyboard and I can start changing that dimension again. But for this one, I am going to stick with that 38 millimeters. So I'm going to type that in again and just press enter. So that circle has now added. So you'll notice a couple of things in terms of how that sketch element has changed. So the edge of it is now black instead of blue. That just means that it's constrained and it's locked into that position as well as that dimension. Also, if I zoom in to the origin of that, you'll notice this symbol appears. So if I left click on that, it comes up in the bottom right of my screen, showing me that that is a coincident constraint. So that's just telling me that the center of this circle is locked into that origin. Once again, if I wanted to change that, I can simply left click and press delete on the keyboard. Once I've finished that sketch, which I have, I'm just going to simply click finish sketch in the top right. And it's going to take me back out of that sketch workspace. So now, once again, I'm going to use that home button next to the view cube. And it's just going to show me that circle that I've created. But now what we need to do for the next step of this egg cup is we need to draw another circle above this one. But you'll notice that if I do create sketch, there's no plane above this one. So there's nothing for me to draw this circle onto. So I'm just going to press escape again, just to show that I no longer need that create sketch. This time though, I'm going to move along this panel and I'm going to go to construct and I'm going to select offset plane. So usually when you use a function on Fusion 360, it will come up with a dialog box. And this just gives you some instructions and also some parameters that you can change for making this one. So in the case of offset plane, what it's asking us to do first is select the plane. So this is just where are we making this offset plane from. So for this, I can either select the circle or that origin plane at the bottom. So I'm going to select the circle and I can then drag this offset plane up and down using the arrow. Or once again, I can simply type in a value. So this offset plane needs to be 18 millimeters. So I'm going to type in 18 and press enter. Simple as that. So next, what I'm going to do is the same as before with a slight twist. So I'm going to go to the create panel and I'm going to select create sketch. But this time, rather than using any of these origin planes, I'm going to select this one that we've just created. Once again, you'll notice it snaps straight into this plane, which is absolutely perfect for what we need to do on this sketch. So again, this is where the repetition comes in, and this is where you can start trying to cement those fundamentals. So I'm going to go to create, circle, and then center diameter circle again. I'm going to place it in the origin, but this time the circle needs to be 16 millimeters. So I'm going to type in 16 and press enter. Then finish sketch up in the top right. And if I click the home button, It just gives you an idea. So what we're doing at the minute is just stacking those circles on top of each other. So deja vu is going to start kicking in even more because we're going to go to construct once again and offset plane. This time now, we're going to create our offset from the circle that we've just created. So I'm going to select that as our plane. This time now, it's going to be a 20mm offset. So we're starting to stack these planes on top of each other as well now. So create sketch, select that plane that we've just created. And then if you like, and you've been paying attention, you'll notice that when you go to create and circle, we're going to start using the keyboard shortcut just to speed things up a bit. So I'm going to press C on the keyboard and it's going to automatically add that circle function. So the origin, I'm going to left click there, and this circle is going to be 30mm. So we're starting to see these rings within each other now. So finish sketch. Once again, we've got another circle and we're going to create, you've guessed it, another offset plane. So from this circle, and don't worry, this will be the final one. So this is another 20mm offset. We're going to create that sketch on there. We're going to press C on our keyboards. But this time we're going to create a 44mm circle. So that's just going to sit that nice big free range, friendly to the chicken's egg right on top of there. So I'm going to click finish sketch. We've now got this stack of sketches and we're done with the sketch environment now for this egg cup. So what we're going to use next is we're still going to be on that create panel. But what we're going to be doing this time is we want to join those shapes together. So I'm going to go to Loft and I'm going to click there. So this one becomes a bit more complicated and difficult to read at first. But if you look at the first box, it's asking me to select some profiles. So that's just asking me what shapes do you want to join together. So all I need to do is make sure that this cursor symbol is ticked. And then I just need to click these circles in ascending order. And what you'll notice is it starts to join these profiles together with a nice smooth transitional shape. So if I just keep clicking until I've selected all 4 profiles, you'll notice that the profiles then get added to this profiles window. You don't need to know too much about that for the time being, but that's just showing us which profiles are included. You'll also notice you've got some other options here. So we can change how the shapes merge. We can create a closed shape and it's going to add more of this shape that joins these two and just keeps those internal ones as well. So we're going to stick with having that as an open shape. So just make sure that that closed box is unticked. You can also play around with these dials and make slightly different shapes. So if I use this right view by clicking on the view cube, you'll notice that I can drag these symbols around and I can start to create a slightly different egg cup. So feel free to have a play around with those and just get a slightly different shape. Once you're happy with how it looks, simply click OK, and it will now make this 3-dimensional shape. So if I just click the home button once again, we'll notice that we've got this nice curved shape for our egg cup. But at the minute, we can't place that egg cup on top. So what we're going to need to do is modify this 3D shape. So we've created our shape. So now we're going to move to the modify panel. So I'm going to click that drop down menu and I'm going to select shell. So this just removes some of that material just so we can have a nice hollow bit on the inside. So in this dialog box, it's given me the option of selecting faces and bodies. So what you'll notice is if I select this shape, It then adds another box. So for this, it wants us to add in what our inside thickness is. So in other terms, it's just how thick do we want that wall to be if this shape was hollow. So if I just type in 2 mm, we're going to see that what it does, it doesn't just hollow out the inside. Whatever face you select, it's going to remove that face and then hollow out the rest. So if we suddenly decided that we didn't want to do that, we can then change this back to 0. So we want this to be 0 mm. I can also carry on selecting different faces. So if you have a shape and you want it to keep all the faces but still hollow out that inside, what you need to do is just use that view cube and that orbit function just to scroll around it. And then you want to select every single face or shape. This can be a bit more tricky when you have a body with lots of different faces. So what you can also do is if you left click and drag around it, you can select more than one face. But for this one, I just need that top face. So if you've got faces that you don't want to include, simply click on the X and then reselect the faces that you do want to be included. So we want just that top face and we want a 2 mm wall thickness. So I'm just going to type in 2 and press OK. You can also change the direction, so you can have an outside thickness or both. But for now, we're just going to stick with just an inside thickness. So click OK once you're done. And we've now got our beautiful and wonderful egg cup.